What's up guys, welcome to another episode of Writing Tips, where I break down tropes and archetypes from your favorite stories in the hopes that you can learn a little bit more about writing. Today we're going to talk about a very special and unique kind of genre known as the fantasy kitchen sink. So, you guys know when the kitchen sink is filled with dirty dishes, there's a mixture of plates, cups, bowls, spoons, forks, and knives, right? Imagine if you were to have that same mixture, but it was within the context of a fictional story, and instead of silverware, you threw in Egyptian folklore with Japanese mythology, and you mixed it with creatures from other European countries like Germany and Ireland, and then you spiced it all up with a little sci-fi, and added elements like time travel and marauding aliens into the mix. You would get a fantasy kitchen sink. You would get a strange and unique setting that is a hodgepodge of myths, fables, and fairy tales from all kinds of cultures and genres from around the globe. In a story that takes place in a fantasy kitchen sink setting, expect there to be a colorful cast of characters that all come from vastly different origins. Not only does magic exist in this fictional universe, but there's also aliens, time travelers, reporters, angels, demons, ninjas, werewolves, cowboys, gods, detectives, zombies, super soldiers, robots, and mutants. More characters get resurrected in the fantasy kitchen sink than they do in any other genre, so the possibilities are endless. Also, expect the themes of a fantasy kitchen sink to revolve around compassion and discrimination, identity and self-acceptance, mercy and hatred, grief and ambition, redemption and resurrection. What does it mean to be a good person? Does everyone deserve a second chance? How far can you go to protect the things you love without turning into the very monsters that you're fighting? These are all morals that you can commonly find within this genre. Let's take a look at some examples of this genre. The fantasy kitchen sink gave way to a subgenre that totally outgrew its predecessor and became way more popular in modern pop culture, and that's the superhero genre. Hands down, the most famous example of the fantasy kitchen sink genre are the DC and Marvel comics, which have been further popularized by their live-action adaptations to the big screen. As a side note, fantasy kitchen sink should not be confused with the superhero subgenre. The superhero subgenre focuses specifically on people with superpowers fighting crime. Fantasy kitchen sinks tend to be larger scope stories with more epic stakes than just stopping bank robberies. But just within the Justice League alone, you got a godlike alien who gets his powers from the sun, a nocturnal billionaire vigilante, a Greek goddess, a speedster, a space cop, a half-blood merman, a cyborg, an alien shapeshifter who's working undercover as a human, and a teenage kid who can turn into a magical warrior just by saying one word. And that's barely scratching the surface. But the earliest case of fantasy kitchen sink that I've personally come across was in the Chronicles of Narnia, published back in 1950 by author C.S. Lewis. Even Lewis's friend and fellow author, J.R.R. Tolkien, critiqued how odd Narnia's ensemble was and admitted that it was too weird for him to understand. The world of Narnia not only contained creatures from Greek folklore, like fauns, centaurs, cyclopses, phoenixes, and pegasi, but also creatures from German and Celtic mythology, like dwarves and hags. There's even a race of one-footed humanoids called monopods, whose origins can be traced back to Indian mythology. Lewis added a little extra sizzle to the mix by sprinkling in his own original races, species such as the amphibious marshwiggles, and the fact that the stars themselves are an angelic race of demigods are 100% Lewis's creations. There's also a fictional dark god named Tash, whom author Samir Rahim has quoted as a bizarre concoction of a Babylonian devil and a Hindu god. But what really made Narnia stand out was the inclusion of biblical mythology. Biblical demons such as incubi were mentioned in the books as servants within the White Witch's army, and even the god ruler of Narnia, the character of Aslan, is meant to literally be Jesus Christ himself. I do want to point out that just because you combine one or two mythologies together, that doesn't make your story a fantasy kitchen sink. It has to interlay multiple genres of storytelling and compile both science and magic into your cast of fantasy and alien creatures. For example, Harry Potter conjoins German, English, Scottish, and Greek mythology together, but that's not enough to make it a fantasy kitchen sink. What elevates Narnia to that status but not Harry Potter is the fact that Narnia incorporates interdimensional travel and time travel. Even though Lewis doesn't go into scientific detail breaking down how his characters can travel between worlds, the fact that people from Earth can transport themselves across space, time, and light does dip the narrative's toe into the mysteries of science, delving ever so slightly into sci-fi, even if that wasn't Lewis's intention. More modern examples of fantasy kitchen sink can be found in franchises like Mortal Kombat, Power Rangers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Dragon Ball Z, Overwatch, and Hellboy. Mortal Kombat establishes itself as a medieval Asian fantasy, with the Order of Light being a group of Shaolin monks who practice magic and worship a thunder god. The setting of Mortal Kombat transcends into a fantasy kitchen sink when it introduces interdimensional travel with other planets like Outworld, Edenia, and Netherrealm. What makes it even more interesting is when you churn all of the inhabitants of those universes together with the humans of Earth. You start bringing in aliens based off of reptiles and bugs, necromancers, gunslingers, cyborgs, genetic experiments, undead warriors with superpowers, and ninja with magic swords. With Hellboy, you have a secret government organization of monster hunters, a historical figure reimagined as an occult priest armed with a steampunk glove, a pyrokinetic, a fishman, a deformed assassin, Nazis, Lovecraftian creatures, and topping it all off is a superpowered cigar-chomping, half-human, half-demon with a stone hand. It crosses over between the dark fantasy, urban fantasy, horror, steampunk, and two-fisted tail subgenres. And with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it's practically all in the name. Just by reading the title, you can tell what kind of story you're in for. A fantasy kitchen sink through and through. Every version of TMNT practically lives and breathes this trope. If you want to learn more about the fantasy kitchen sink genre, go ahead and take a look at the TV Tropes website, where they have a whole library of knowledge dedicated to tropes and archetypes within storytelling. If you're interested in learning more about writing techniques, go ahead and subscribe so that you can get notified when I post a new video. Leave a comment down below and list off any stories that you think might be a fantasy kitchen sink. Don't forget to like this video, and I'll catch you guys next time.